Chapter 24. My father swung into action, as I'd seen him do many times before at the zoo. The first thing we'll need to do is rig the airplane, he said. My gear's in the Land Rover. Have one of your men bring it over. Fine, Moja said and walked away. My father, Donovan, and I walked to the airplane with 2 guards close behind. Moja drove up in the Land Rover, and my father unloaded the gear. How does all this work? Donovan asked. Pretty simple, my father said as he began to screw together an antenna. The 3 elephants are wearing collars with transmitters attached to them. Each transmitter sends out a signal on a different frequency. We punch in their number on the receiver, and when we hear their signal, we can get a location on them. Here, I'll show you. He attached a small antenna to a handheld receiver, then he reached into the Land Rover and pulled out a black metal box the size of a shoebox and handed it to Donovan. That's the transmitter, he said. Donovan tested its weight. It's heavy. So are elephants. The smaller the animal, the smaller the transmitter. Most of the size and weight is from the battery that runs the transmitter. The transmitters are attached to the heavy canvas collars. The reason we use canvas is that eventually the canvas rots and the collars come off so the elephant doesn't have to wear it forever. How long do the batteries last? A couple of years, my father said. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Depends. Do you see the number on the transmitter? Donovan nodded. That's the frequency number. There's a magnet on the side of the transmitter. Take it off. Donovan removed the small gray magnet. Removing the magnet activates the transmitter. My father flipped a switch on the receiver and pointed the antenna at the black box. He turned the receiver dials, and we heard a steady beep, beep, beep over the small built-in speaker. He switched it off. In the airplane, we'll use headphones because of the noise. On the ground, it's generally quiet enough to hear the signal over the speaker. What's the range of the signal? Donovan asked. Depends on the contour of the land, the weather, where the elephants are, a lot of different things. The range is much greater from the air than it is from the land because you're above the hills and the signal isn't interrupted. My father unhooked the antenna from the receiver and took it over to the airplane. I'll attach the antenna to the wing strut and run a cable inside. He took black electric tape and attached the antenna securely, then hooked up the receiver. Let's test the thing and make sure it works. Jake, take the transmitter and go out a little ways. Donovan handed me the transmitter, and I jogged out about 20 yards from the airplane. My father turned on the receiver, and we heard the signal. Okay, he said, switching the receiver off. I ran back. Put the transmitter back in the Land Rover. If we dart an uncollared elephant, we'll pull a collar on it. I've got a couple of spares. Always the biologist, I thought. He wouldn't pass up an opportunity to further his research no matter what the circumstances were. What now, Dr. Lanza? Donovan asked. My father thought for a moment, then he said, Okay, this is how we'll do it. We'll find the elephants, land nearby if we can, and radio in our location. Your men will meet us at the airplane with my Land Rover and a truck for the ivory, and I'll get the tranquilizer gear together. Do you have water? Yes. We'll need it to cool the elephant down while it's tranquilized. They tend to overheat, and I don't want to lose one. Have your men bring several large containers filled with water. Donovan looked at Moja, who nodded like he understood. Shall we go then? One more thing, my father said. The fewer people, the better. 1 man in the truck, 1 man in the Land Rover. We don't need any more than this. That will be fine, Dr. Lanza, Donovan said. Young Jacob will remain here. No way, my father said. He's not leaving my sight or the deal is off. Donovan thought about this for a moment. In that case, he said, we'll take Moja with us to keep Jacob company. And I must tell you that Moja is not very fond of Jacob and would like nothing more than to end his life. My father ignored his remark. Let's go and get this over with. Moja gave the 2 guards some orders, then we all climbed into the airplane. I called him back, and Moja got in next to me. Donovan got into the pilot's seat, and my father got in next to him. Donovan started the airplane. From the back, I watched as my father attached the cable to the receiver and slipped on a headset so he could hear the signal above the noise of the engine. I wondered when we'd have time to talk and what I would say to him about my mother. I had so many things to tell him. Donovan taxied out into the open and took off. In a few minutes, we were in the air. It was light out, and for the first time since I'd arrived, the sky was overcast. I couldn't hear what my father and Donovan were saying above the engine noise. Every once in a while, my father gave a hand signal, and Donovan eased the airplane in the direction he was pointing. We made several very wide circles, then my father pointed straight ahead. We flew over the top of the east hill where the cave was located, and my father directed him to fly in another circle. My father nodded and said something, and Donovan cut the engine and started to bring the airplane down. While he was still above the hills, he radioed in our position. Donovan had been right. The elephants were near. We hadn't been in the airplane more than 15 minutes. He was landing in the narrow valley between the two hills. The wheels touched down, and we rolled over the savannah. "I guess your look is good, Dr. Lanza," he said after he turned the engine off. "We'll see," my father said grimly. Finding them was easy. He opened the door and jumped out. The rest of us followed. My father took the antenna off the wing and attached it to the receiver and pointed it east above his head. "Beep, beep, beep. They're in the hills," he said. "They don't seem to be moving much. That's good. I might be able to get close, but we'll have to wait for my gear." Donovan looked at his watch. "It should be here within an hour." My father turned the receiver off and looked at me. "Okay," he said. "Why are you here?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure that this was the right time to get into it. My father saw my hesitation and turned to Donovan. "How about some privacy?" he said. Donovan didn't move and didn't respond. "I gave you my word that I'd cooperate," my father said angrily. "I suppose there's nothing you can do," he said. "You may take a short walk, no more than 25 feet away." He turned to Moja. "If they go further or try to run, shoot the boy in the back." Moja smiled and slipped his rifles off safety. "You won't need it," my father said. "Come on, Jake." We walked a few yards away and stopped. "Okay, Jake, what's going on?" I took a deep breath. "Well," I began. "First off, I'm sorry about all the elephants. I've screwed everything up." "Don't worry about the elephants," my father said. "The poachers have been watching me for a long time, and I was just about ready to give up. They're organized and have all the resources in the world. They even had a good idea of where the elephants were." He looked toward the East Hills. "If you hadn't shown up, I probably wouldn't have thought of this, and they would have killed the elephants." I wasn't convinced. "They've been taking your mail," I said. "Yes, I thought so. I haven't gotten a letter from you or your mother in months. I figured that something was going on. They cut me off." I nodded. "So why are you here, Jake? Beth must be going—" "Mom died," I said. I didn't know any other way to put it. He looked confused. "What?" I told him about the accident and the funeral. He listened in silence. When I finished, his shoulders began to shake and he dropped to his knees. I put my arms around him. We held each other and cried for a long time. After a while, he pulled away and we both wiped the tears from our faces. "I loved her like I'd never loved anyone," he said. I nodded. My father stood up and glanced at the airplane, trying to regain his composure. He looked back at me. "You still haven't said why you're here. What about Sam?" I told him the whole story. The white light floating above Africa, meeting Sapit, Satonik, the poachers, the rain ceremony, Lumea's grave, the cave. "You mean your friend Sapit's in the cave now?" "As far as I know," I said. "The cave is in the hills to the east." He looked at the sky, then looked back at me and grinned. "Sapit might be right," he said. "You may be here for more reasons than you know. Perhaps we all are. I'm looking forward to meeting him." "You're going to like each other," I said. We heard engines in the distance and looked down the valley. The Land Rover and truck were approaching rapidly. "Well, let's get this over with," he said. He put his arm around my shoulder and we walked back to the airplane.